Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. As we turn the calendar to December, we want to start today with an update on Oklahoma's wheat crop. Here's SUNUP's Dave Deacon and our Precision Nutrient Management Specialist, Brian Arnall.
First week in December and the wheat crop's coming along across Oklahoma. Brian, what have you seen with wheat across the state?
We're at several stages. You know, the early wheat that's up, kind of like what we're standing in right now, it's doing really good. Everything's just shutting down right now. We've got cooler temperatures, night times are down, so we don't have a lot of growing activity. The last couple of weeks we've had enough warmth though. We're seeing that later sun wheat starting to emerge, so we're seeing some wheat starting to get up that was planted during that cold when we finally got dry. So we're kind of in the tale of two tales right now, where we've got some big wheat that's just sitting there right there, and some wheat that's germinating. But overall, the stands are coming out of the ground and we've got wheat. The wheat that's been up, you're seeing signs of nitrogen deficiencies, you're seeing signs of other things going on, and we're going to have to watch that as the season goes. On our side slopes and our very sandy ground, that wheat was in the ground early, that had a lot of nitrogen early. That ground's probably lost a lot of the nitrate through leaching processes. So the well drained and the side slopes, and we're probably not getting that back. We've got a lot of yellowing in lower lying areas where we may have held water for a while. Now that's going to be more to denitrification and lack of oxygen. And so it yellowed up, but it probably responded. You saw some green up as we dried out and got a few warm days. And so we've lost some nitrogen there, but it will come back.
We've been fortunate with that rainfall and like you say, the wheat's starting to go into dormancy. When should producers start to worry about nutritional needs for the wheat? Whenever the yellow becomes a little more serious, when should people be concerned?
So it depends on what your purpose is.
Right.
So if we're in a grazing system or a grazing scenario, dual purpose or graze out, if we're starting to see yellow, we need to be looking at taking care of that as soon as possible. Get the nitrogen down. So maybe if we have a warm up and we start growing again and we have that spell, we have the nitrogen there. If we're grain only, especially on the really smaller wheat that's just now germinating, we can wait. We can wait through January or February, just when the time's right, the weather's right. But we need to be making our plans now. Like I said, keep an eye out. We need to be scouting our fields, seeing how we're doing, how the plants are doing, getting out there, keeping an eye out for disease or insects.
There is that movement between dormancy and not. Whenever it grows a little bit, then it stops. What's the conditions? What's the overall soil temperature, air temperature need to be?
So we're looking at, we get growth when our soil temperatures are in the 40s or above, and you can see it. We have a little bit of growth even if we start off with a 25-30 degree morning, but if we get up into 70s, and we'll see the plants grow because our soil temps are still warm. So even though we get cold at night, we had a previously warm day, so our soil temps are still warm, so we get some growth. It's when we cycle that high out. We slow down, shut down when our nights and our daytimes are below 40, and that really slows down the cycle. And the wheat can kind of come in and out of it and do a little bit of growth.
And on top of that, we got to talk about the enriched strip. It's important this time of year.
Yeah, and right now is a great time. So it's not too late because we've been in dormancy, right, or we're not really growing rapidly. So if you haven't put out the enriched strips, go ahead and get them out now. 50 to 40 pounds of nitrogen. You can use a push spreader, ATV liquid, whatever your applicator is, put it out there to give us an idea of what's going on as we go into the spring, as we go into top dress timing.
And that's still a couple months away, but it's time to maybe start thinking about that.
Yeah, if you got cattle out on wheat right now, I'd go ahead and put it out right now because we can use that as a guideline for when we want to get on it early. And if you're a grain only, it's looking for that top dress timing.
Now, you also have an event coming up here really soon. Let's talk about that.
So it's the Winter Crop School. It's December 11th and 12th. It's on the OSU campus at the Student Union. It's developed for CCAs and certified applicators, commercial applicators. So we offer 12 CCA credits and we offer 4 ODAF applicator credits in this meeting. It's an advanced meeting, but it's still open to all, open to the public and everybody else. We've got some great topics. It's called a Winter Crop School, but we're talking more than just wheat. So we do have a lot of wheat topics. We'll have Dr. Lalato from K-State coming down, talking about their high yield contest in wheat. We're going to be talking soil health, soil conservation, and things like that. And so we have visitors coming in. We'll have Dr. Nelson with K-State. We got Dr. Warren coming in with OSU. We're going to be talking cotton production. We're going to have soybean production, and everything's in there kind of the high end for the CCAs, but producers are welcome. Registration is available online at www.sunup.okstate.edu.
Okay, thank you very much. Brian Arnall, Extension Precision Management Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist, is here now. And Kim, Thanksgiving is behind us, and it seems the markets are in a little bit of holiday mode right now. Talk about that.
Well, that's normal happening for this time of year. Producers and the buyers, they've just come off a long holiday weekend. They're looking and seeing what's going on around the world. You know, the farmers don't need money right now. Now, as we get on into closer to Christmas, some producers will want to generate a little Christmas money, and so they'll sell some product there. Also, some buyers that have backed off sales will come in, and it's normally prices may decline just a little bit during this period, and they'll look for some good buys there.
There wasn't Thanksgiving, though, in Russia, and
Yes.
there's a blockade of Ukrainian export ports. What's the situation there, and how's that impacting prices?
Yeah, Russia put in a blockade for two of Ukraine's ports. You know, they've got other ports that they're shipping most of the grain out of. There was a little rally in wheat, maybe because of that, but right now, on the crop and the crop export and crop prices, probably little to no impact at all.
What about Russia's 2019 crop and production news?
Well, I got some news a couple weeks ago that Russia's increasing their planted acres of all crops for the 19, and I was concerned about wheat. And this week from the Russians, they released that for their projection for 2019 wheat is exactly the same as their 2018 wheat production. It was about 2.6 billion bushels. Now, the thing to remember on that is that once you put out an estimate like that, it's about 50-50. 50% of the time it's going to be greater than 2.6 billion. 50% of the time it's going to be less. Let's just hope that it's on the lower side of that, and that'll help our prices in 19.
Well, let's talk about our prices here at home. What are you seeing?
Right now, prices are just wallowing around. The good news is I think wheat prices broke their little downtrend that they've had over the last month or so. We got maybe less than a 10-cent price increase, but we'll take any price increase we can get. You look at corn, you look at beans, you look at sorghum, you look at cotton, all of them, we got just a little bit of a price increase, and that probably goes back to your holidays with the producers. They weren't putting commodities on the market. The market needed a little bit of product, and so they bid the price up just to get some producers to turn loose of it.
In terms of crop production in the state, how did this year compare to 2017?
Yeah, what got me to thinking about that was I was talking to a producer on corn production and profit, and they were saying, hey, corn prices are significantly lower, and he said, yes, but my yields are higher, and the increase in yields more than offset the decrease in price. And so I got to looking at that, and you look at wheat. Now it's just the opposite. We had 28 bushels per acre versus 34 last year. Corn for the state of Oklahoma, corn 140 bushels an acre versus 126 last year. Sorghum 48 versus 57, so their sorghum yields down just a little bit, but still relatively good. Cotton at 716 pounds per acre versus 882 last year, but remember last year we just almost had a record there. And canola 880 pounds versus 1,370 last year, so canola down.
And then what do you think we'll see in terms of acreage use for 2019?
I don't see a whole lot of change. You know, they were talking about higher wheat planted acres, and then we got the delays there. However, I think the producers have had a good couple of weeks to get in this crop. So I think there'll be some minor changes, some tweaking here and there, but I don't think we'll see the big changes like we've seen in past years.
Okay, Kim, lots of great information. We'll see you again next week.
Hello, Wes Lee with your weekly Mesonet weather report. After a very wet August and September, it has turned off dry in most of the state. If we look at the number of days it has been since we have received a 1/4 inch of rain, it has been well over a month in most western counties. There has been a lot of speculation lately that a weak El Nino weather pattern would develop for the winter months. Most meteorologists now predict the odds of that happening to be at 75 or 80% in December. A typical assumption is that an El Nino pattern brings Oklahoma a cooler and wetter winter. Research shows that this is not always the case. El Ninos can be divided into three categories: strong, moderate, and weak. Strong El Ninos typically are those associated with a cooler and wetter winter for Oklahoma. However, in weak El Nino patterns, these effects are not always seen. Oklahoma experienced 8 weak El Nino patterns from 1951 to 2005. In about 2/3 of these events, we experienced a below normal rainfall pattern for the winter months. That trend continued on with our last weak El Nino year in 2014, where it was much drier than normal. 2-week forecasts also back up this phenomena, with temperature and rainfall patterns predicted to be below normal. Now here's Gary with more on the rainfall details.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, our times of plenty seem to have gone away lately, and our old foe drought seems to be building in the state once again. So let's get right to the latest drought monitor map and see where we're at. Northeast Oklahoma is still the trouble area, and while we don't have a lot of drought up there, we do see that yellow abnormally dry condition color painted all over the northeastern quarter. Now, while that doesn't signify drought itself, it does signify areas that are coming into drought. So if we don't get appreciable rainfall in that area, definitely going to see that brown moderate drought start to intensify, spread, and also possibly head to severe drought in some areas. This will show you why we are starting to enter a more troublesome period with our moisture. So for the last 30 days, we see once again area in northeast Oklahoma is the hardest hit area, with from about 1 inch below normal to more than 2 inches below normal. But really the entire state, save for the far southeastern corner of Oklahoma, remains in deficit conditions over the last 30 days. That's a far cry from where we were during August and September and October. And if we look back at 60 days, we see some of that residual moisture from that longer time period showing up in all those great surpluses over, once again, all but the southeastern portion of the state, and this time down into east central Oklahoma and also into central Oklahoma. But again, those big surplus numbers surround those areas. Now we look at the really hard-hit area up in northeast Oklahoma. If we go all the way back to the beginning of 2018, we see deficits in that region from 10 inches all the way up to about 16 inches. And so that's the core area of that hardest hit drought up in northeast Oklahoma. Now, like I said, this is nothing to be alarmed about just yet. We do need rainfall over the entire state, but especially up in northeast Oklahoma. So we'll keep an eye on that for you and get back to you next week with the latest drought monitor map. That's it for this time. We'll see you again next week.
Usually when we come out here to the Cross Timbers experimental range, it's with John, and John, usually you're burning something, you're doing research or demonstrating some type of burn plot, but today you guys are setting up one of those demonstration plots.
Yeah. So what we have here is an area that we had under a study for several years. The study started in the early 80s. Mm-hmm. We finished it up sometime in the mid 20s or mid 2000s. Mm-hmm. And so this area was unburned. So the cedars just grew like they grow if you don't burn them. I mean, that's what happens. We got some really large cedars. So we had some people come in, we did some cedar work on it, and we're just doing some different things with the cedar cutting and stuff that we're doing to try to demonstrate to folks some of their options that they can do whenever they hire people to cut cedars. There's probably 3 to 5 acres in this area that was cleared. It's covered with close to 20-foot cedar trees and a very thick, dense cover and canopy of it.
So with this area, you're wanting to conduct a little bit of research, but also show people firsthand that, yeah, you can clear it and there is life after cedar.
That's exactly right. And to show them, give them some ideas about what could do, what they can help do. So one of the things we had them do when they come in here to cut we had them just cut and we had them stuffed. So you see in the background in these areas, there's trees that we didn't cut, but they all have dead trees that we did cut pushed up underneath them. So what that's going to do is enhance our burn program. So when we go to burn, we can light off these dead trees. They're going to catch on fire, carry up into the bigger trees, and hopefully knock a bunch of them back. Piling, you've got a big pile. So you've got to get rid of that pile a lot of times. How do you get rid of the pile? You burn it. Well, when do you burn it? You know, people think, oh, the best, we've talked about this before.
Right.
You know, when's the best time to burn piles? Well, the best time to burn piles is in May and June. That's the best time. It's not the winter time. It's not when there's snow on the ground, because that snow doesn't typically last long here in Oklahoma and that kind of stuff. But also one thing to look at, in these areas like this one that are pretty dense cover, there's not much fuel left. So we've got a great opportunity coming this spring that we could burn these piles where we have hardly any fuel. It hasn't started recovering yet. So we got a lot of bare ground. There's not going to be a lot of probability for a fire creeping or escaping, getting out, because you do have a lot of bare ground because it was shaded out by this thick canopy. So then the other problem you run into with piles is when you burn them out, a lot of times you leave bare spots. It kills. It sterilizes the soil for a period of time, sometimes for several years. So that can be an issue if people want it. If you do cut cedars, because if you cut them and don't follow it up with fire, you're pretty much wasting your time and you're wasting your money, because you're going to be back in here and within at least 6 to 10 years redoing the same thing over again.
One thing that we noticed whenever we showed up out here was where it was cleared, there wasn't grass, you know, everywhere, but there were small cedar trees in there.
And if you go and look, and that's the one thing that a lot of people will always say, man, I cut this place, and then there was more cedars grew back. Well, yeah.
Right.
So what has been happening? Well, those cedars, especially the females that produce the seeds, they've been dropping their seeds, and so they've been sprouting. So you got certain seeds. So you got lots of little bitty trees that the cutter he can't see those. And plus they can't cut them even if they could, because they're just so small. So within a 4-year period, these little trees that are maybe just a half a foot tall, they'll be 4 foot tall within 4 years. But that's when you got to follow it up with fire and knock those seedlings back and get them down, and then you won't have that problem to do that. And in that way, the investment that you made, because this is an investment in your land, whenever you spend this money to have cedars removed and have them cut down and let them get that way, you need to make sure that investment lasts for a long period of time, and fire is what makes that investment last.
So cut now, burn in the spring, and then burn again in the summer.
That's right.
Okay, thank you much, John Weir, Extension Fire Ecologist here with Oklahoma State University.
Cow-calf producers across the Southwest that have some bred replacement heifers that they're going to calve out for the first time as 2-year-olds next spring will want to remember that I think the key to success with those replacement heifers is to have them in good body condition at calving time next spring. Good body condition meaning that on our 1 through 9 body condition scoring scale, we'll want them to at least be about a midpoint 5, and certainly a 6 is probably more ideal for those 2-year-olds at calving time. The reason this is so important is illustrated by the research that was done here at Oklahoma State University a number of years ago, where basically they compared heifers that were calved in good body condition, like the heifer you see on the screen, the 6, as compared to heifers that were calved in poor body condition, like this heifer, that we'd probably call either a 3 or a 4 on our body condition scoring scale. What you'll see if you look at this particular graphic closely, those heifers that were in thin body condition at calving time, even those that were fed to greatly increase body condition after calving, those heifers still only rebred at a 67% rate, much lower than the heifers that were in good body condition at calving time and either maintained that through the breeding season or even had a chance to gain a little bit more after calving going into the breeding season, both those groups above 90%. So I think the moral of the story is we want to have these heifers in good body condition at calving time, in that body condition 5 or 6 range, and if we can just maintain that, throughout the rest of the calving season into the breeding season, we'll be pleased with the reproductive success of those 2-year-olds next spring. Keep that in mind as you go through this fall and winter feeding season. Put together a feeding program that allows these heifers to maintain that good body condition that they've got on them now coming out of summer, going into the fall, so that they're in that body condition score of a 5 or 6 at calving time next spring, and we'll get that rebreeding percentage that we want. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Time now for a taste test. So many wheat varieties are grown all around the world and harvested to make all kinds of different food products. With that in mind, a pair of OSU researchers are raising the question, can people really tell the difference in bread made with 2 of Oklahoma's most popular wheat varieties? SUNUP videographer Ed Barron is in the mix as they find the answer.
When I came here, I didn't know much about wheat, and I learned about these interesting competitions they have where students will grow their own wheat, send the wheat in, and then the university judges them. They look at the kernel size and they even go to the trouble of baking them. That's the same way we evaluate wheat varieties being considered for release to the public. But part of the evaluation never included taste. That just raised the question, could people really tell the difference? And so we designed a research experiment to test that.
We wanted all of the wheat varieties treated exactly the same. And so all of this is standardized. Every sample was treated the exact same time, proofed the exact same time. So all of the samples are treated so close to the same that we're not influencing how tall the loaf rises or the taste. That's what we were shooting at. Norwood and I talked about, what, you think they'll be able to tell the difference? And I was like, nah, I don't think so. But I was really surprised and I was really shocked, and it really enlightened me.
What we found is that for some varieties they couldn't tell the difference, but for some varieties they could. There were 2 in particular, the Gallagher and Ruby Lee varieties. People could tell the difference between the 2 varieties 68 to 75% of the time. For some instances, for some particular wheat varieties, people can tell the difference between them. We don't know if they like one more than the other. We don't know how different they are. All that we know is that often they can tell the difference.
Used to, if you were going to make a cookie, they said you have to use pastry flour or you have to use low protein. That's the way you do it. But now bakers are like, you don't have to do it that way. If I use a high protein flour, my cookie turns out crisper or has a different mouthfeel. So I see a lot of bakeries kind of bending the rules and going non-traditional routes of flours that they use to get different tastes and different textures.
It just begs so many other questions. Why do they taste different? How do they taste different? Do they taste so different that it matters? Do people really like one more than another? And Oklahoma is a leader in wheat breeding. We're very good at it. OSU produces really good strains of wheat. And so what this means is that it opens up a lot of opportunities for us. If we can differentiate our wheat not just by its milling properties, not just by its growing properties, but in its flavor profiles, that just opens up more opportunities for Oklahoma producers.
So winter has come to Oklahoma again this year. Pretty much have had freezing temperatures throughout the state. And I thought this morning we'd talk real briefly about our pets and about some things that are important to take care of in the winter. Now obviously, you got a dog like Rusty or Todd, got long hair, they can tolerate the cold a little bit better than short-haired dogs. Some of our short-haired dogs, sometimes we like to put either some little sweater or something on them to help them tolerate the cold a little bit. Probably a good idea to make sure you understand the health of your pet. If you're unsure, you might want to have your vet give it an examination, because if you have some type of illness or some type of disease condition, this will also affect how well your pets can tolerate the cold. We need to make sure and remember to feed our pets well in the winter. They do exert more energy trying to stay warm, but we have to be careful. We sure don't want them to get obese on us. Really, one of the most important things you need to do for your pets is make sure they have a good, clean, fresh water supply. We don't want that water to get too cold. They're going to be more likely to drink it if it's at tap water and not icy, so you may have to frequently change your water. One of the other things that's a concern for us, if we walk our pets on the streets or sidewalks and we get snow and ice, we need to keep a close look at those paws, make sure we don't get any debris in there, pieces of ice that cause problems. The other thing that concerns us if we're walking our dogs and people are using a lot of the chemicals that we use to melt the snow and ice, when we get through with that walk, be sure and wipe those paws down or even wipe the underside of these smaller dogs to make sure we get all those chemicals off. One of the other concerns we have is when we go out to start our cars in the morning, you know, cats love to curl up to a warm spot, so they may crawl up into your engine and curl up on that warm engine. So you might want to bang on your hood or give a honk and when you get in that car before you start to hopefully get any cats that may be in there, give them a chance to get out. And the last thing I'd like to talk about this morning is make sure your dogs and cats have a warm place to stay. If you're going to leave them outside, it needs to be a nice, insulated, dry spot where they can stay warm. I would not suggest leaving dogs or cats out in freezing temperatures for long periods of time. They need to come in and warm up. They're like you or me. I don't want to stay out there all day either. So just remember to use some common sense and take care of your pets this winter. If you'd like a little bit more information about how to care for your pets in the winter, just go to sunup.okstate.edu.
Thanks so much for joining us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime at sunup.okstate.edu and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.